Okay. So thank you. Our meeting topic, the main focus today is standing up to the fascists, both yesterday and today. And I'm really happy that we could have Ann Rogers, who's a veteran of many anti-Nazi actions and important work, to talk about the main lessons from that and the things that we need to be looking for today is looking back at the history and applying that to what we're doing now. I don't know if everybody had a chance, but there's a new video that we put on the Radical Women website, and it's Gary Hodderson talking about standing up to fascist creeps, which was a presentation she gave to Seattle Radical Women a number of years ago. And Gina can put the link to that in the chat because it really is a fabulous look at that history. And Anne was going to both talk about, the development of United Front Against Fascism, but some of its later days. So if you want to find out the very early origin, I encourage you to look at that video that Gary Hodderson did. But I think that the lessons that come through there very strongly that will come through our discussion today is that fascism comes out of periods of economic and social instability, that the reaction from many angry white men and others who are afraid of losing their jobs or status, and so they scapegoat people of color, women, radicals, LGBTQ people, immigrants, and try to blame all of us for capitalism's basic flaws. So that fascism really comes down to a very expensive, a very deadly attempt by capitalism to save itself by smashing its opposition and smashing the working class. So with that framework, United Front Against Fascism that Ann Rogers was part of in the 90s was really a very, very important effort because it brought those issues right to the fore. And Ann Rogers was a key leader in, I think, most, if not all, of United Front Against Fascism's organizing. She was often one of our security team because we knew she was both super tough and very intimidating to the opposition, but very level-headed as well and thoughtful. As Ann said, she is a Native American feminist and respected leader in Radical Women and Freedom Socialist Party and in the Comrades of Color Caucus of the two organizations. So Ann, would you like to take it away?
Okay. This talk is about UFAF organizing and actions and the skinhead and neo-Nazi movement we were countering 25 to 30 years ago, and their evolvement into who we are countering today. The initial founding meeting of UFAF was from the very first meeting. The emphasis was that UFAF was to be a community-owned and its success was a community responsibility. The reason FSP and RW members were in leadership roles was the fact that we were trained in how to organize a purposeful coalition. All the meetings were held in community centers, and the first order of business was to draw up a statement of our principles of unity that everyone had an input on and were able to agree on the final statement. And maybe Helen can send this statement out after to all, as it is useful when one is joining a coalition and determining if it is democratically run. But I'll read a few sentences that show the purpose and integrity of United Front Against Fascism. The first paragraph spells out why we were organizing, that it as an opposition to racism, bigotry, and the groups that promote them. And we believe that all oppressed and working people have a stake in the fight to stamp out these ideologies and movements. The second paragraph starts out, regardless of our diverse political affiliations and views, which was very important, all members of UFAF understand that solidarity and unity in action are the best means to advance the struggle against neo-Nazi and fascist movements and to defend all human and labor rights. And next paragraph starts out, UFAF is a direct action organization. We are in favor of large, disciplined counter demonstrations against the neo-Nazis and fascists wherever and wherever they meet. And also in that paragraph, we believe that all victims of fascist violence have the right to defend ourselves, which is important. Starting out the fourth paragraph, UFAF is democratic in its internal structure and functioning, and strives at all times to ensure fair representation of all its members in its policy-making bodies. So that was it took some time to get that policy out, but it served a good purpose all through our organizing. As Helen said, the video of Gary's speech pretty much spelled out the first major demonstrations that we had and why we had them. And those that haven't seen the video, basically the neo-Nazis were planning to make the Pacific Northwest an all-white homeland. And in that, they were organizing meetings on Whidbey Island, which we and the communities that the right wing was attacking, which is largely the gay community in Capitol Hill and Seattle, organized the first big demonstration on Whidbey Island. So hopefully you can see that to see what our actions were in the first years. But to that, I will add a few facts. On our first trip to Whidbey Island with 4 busloads of people, and as she said, there were maybe a dozen neo-Nazis camping down in the park, and their leaders did not show up until we left. And we knew who 2 of those leaders were: older, retired, and probably lifelong Nazis. One of them was Richard Butler, a retired businessman from California who relocated to rural Idaho, just north of Coeur d'Alene. And there he built a training compound for disenfranchised youth to be trained to be neo-Nazis. He later lost his property due to a lawsuit and died soon after. The other was a resident of Whidbey Island, and I don't remember his full name, but he went by the name of Reverend Bob, and was a dangerous Nazi. After we counted their actions for several years, you found out that Gary's name and address he sent out that information out in letters to his followers and told them they knew what to do. He sent a copy to Gary to try to stop UFAF organizing. After we published the threat and exposed him at a televised show featuring a debate between a Nazi and someone opposed to the Nazi movement, he must have decided it wasn't the best idea. Further organizing, we kept people involved by having monthly education meetings. So when we learned of a neo-Nazi action or recruiting meeting, we had a list of people to call to counter their events on a moment's notice. And I remember one weekend morning, I woke up about 7 o'clock to the news on the radio, and they were saying that there was to be a neo-Nazi recruitment meeting at the Auburn American Legion Hall. And Auburn is a town about 10 miles or so south of Seattle. And so I got on the phone, called Gary to tell her about it. And then I thought we should try to gather people to picket their meeting. And she agreed. We called RW and FS members who helped call people on our contact list. And we gathered at the hall, chugged down coffee and donuts, and carpooled to Auburn. And when we got there and set up our picket line with signs and chants, some of the youth that were there to be recruited decided it wasn't a place for them and bolted out the door and left. And I remember seeing one older person in the hall in full KKK dress. A group of high schoolers were having a fundraising car wash across the street, and they quit and joined our picket line, as did other people in the neighborhood. We definitely interrupted their recruiting efforts, and the recruiter was not happy. When Marianne went closer to the hall to get a picture of him, he grabbed her camera and smashed it. And she could probably tell you in discussion how she finally got money from him to buy a new one. When they gave up their meeting, we went to the fast food place next door to get some real food. And the owners there gave us all free drinks to go with our food. It usually turns out that the neighborhoods that we were active in really supported us. Another part of UFAF organizing, and a very important part, was our fundraising to pay for the cost of responding to right-wing events near and far. And we did get a lot of money from individuals, unions, and other organizations. And that necessitated meticulous bookkeeping, as that is one way the FBI is able to smash progressive groups for mismanaging the money donated to them. We had our own checking account, and were able to join a Jewish organization that had a 501c tax status and acted as an umbrella group for other small profit organizations. And when the neo-Nazi movement went underground and there wasn't much need for UFAF organizing, by that time the money was mostly gone and the checking account was closed. But all that was back in 1989 to 94 or 5. And a lot has changed and evolved since then. Starting in the mid-90s, the leaders of the skinhead neo-Nazi movement told their members they needed to upgrade their image, let their hair grow, be groomed, and get legitimate jobs. So the dress code went from Doc Marten boots, jeans, and black jackets to polo shirts and slacks. And that is pretty much the Still, the dress code is evident in the Charlottesville neo-Nazi march and riot. The main body of marchers wore white polo shirts and khaki slacks, and getting jobs has resulted in their being trained in communication technology, which is up their organizing skills. And even since then, there has been an overlapping movement that includes younger neo-Nazis like the Proud Boys, the more fascist oath keepers, anti-government dissenters, KKKers, fascist militias, and conspiracy theorists. And it was pretty shocking to learn that a company CEO, a state legislator, and members of police departments of several states were all complicit in the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. All more dangerous than the right-wing ideologies that we encountered in the early 90s, but even more so need to be countered and stood up to. In the past 4 years, the far-right ideologies, including members of the status quo, streamed into the forefront of politics with the blessing of Trump. And so far, it doesn't seem to be a priority for Biden to get a handle on. And it will be pretty interesting to see what convictions come out for the rioters. A fascist regime is more than racist. They deny unions and dictate what kind of life you can lead. The role of women is brutal. So along with the books by Trotsky that Gary showed in the video, I would add When Biology Was Destiny. It details what life was like for women under the German Weimar and Third Reich regimes. And I learned a lot when Seattle Radical Women had a study group on it. So it may be time to revive UFAF as a movement for other groups and individuals to join in on, because it was shocking for me to see a far-right armed militia standing in front of the Utah State Capitol with no Utah State Police in sight during a Black Lives Matter demonstration. So it's time for community resistance, as history has shown that ignoring the threat has pretty disastrous results.